Prologue. The lake did not always whisper. Locals swear it started sometime in the late fall of 1978, right after the early freeze. A sound rose from beneath the ice, thin, stretching, almost like a breath fighting to escape. Hunters heard it first, then fishermen, and then the children who used to skate across the wide shimmering surface until their parents yanked them back home and barred the windows. No one talks about it now. But the lake remembers. And sometimes, if the moon is sharp enough, it reflects things that were never there. This story begins decades later with a photographer who did not believe in any of that. Chapter 1, The First Photograph. Hannah Pierce had driven 9 hours straight from Chicago, her trunk packed with 2 DSLR cameras, a drone, a tripod, and enough energy drinks to keep a corpse awake. She specialized in abandoned places, old hospitals, forgotten tunnels, collapsed mills, but today she wanted something different. Something natural. Something quiet. Lake Briarwood had been trending in a small Urban Explorer subreddit for exactly one reason. Its reflection doesn't match what's in front of you. Most commenters called it a hoax. Some said it was an editing trick. A few insisted it wasn't a joke at all. Hannah wasn't a believer. She was a documentarian. And if the place was real, if the phenomenon held even a shred of truth, she wanted to be the first to capture it clearly. She arrived near dusk. The sky was sliding into navy blue, a gradient melting behind the dense Minnesota pines. The lake itself lay still as polished obsidian. Mist coiled off the surface in thin gray tendrils. Not a single ripple moved across the water. Perfect, she whispered. She set up her tripod at the shoreline. Adjusted her lens. Listened to the wind. There was no wind. Not even a breeze. The stillness was unnerving enough to raise the hairs on her arms. She snapped her first shot. Click. Checked the display. Her stomach tightened. The reflection of the pines was wrong, tilted slightly inward, as if the trees bent toward the water on the other side, though in reality they stood tall and straight. And beyond the trees, in the reflection only, she saw the outline of a cabin. A small one. Dark. Unlit. Not physically present anywhere around the lake. She lowered the camera, scanned the tree line. Nothing. No cabin. No structure. Just forest. She lifted the camera again. The cabin was still there in the reflection. Her heart thudded once, heavy and slow. This has to be some digital glitch, she murmured. But her tone betrayed her. She took another shot. Click. Now the reflection of the cabin door was open. And someone, something, stood just inside, a silhouette barely visible. She zoomed in. The silhouette lifted its arm and waved at her. Hannah froze. Her breath hitched in her chest. This was no glitch. Chapter 2, The Sheriff. By the time she reached the small local sheriff's office, night had fully settled, and frost whispered across the windows. Sheriff Tom Adler looked up from his paperwork with the weary impatience of someone who had heard far too many curious outsiders talk about the lake. "Let me guess," he said. "You went to Briarwood after dark." Hannah blinked. "How did you? You people always do." "You people?" "Photographers. Ghost hunters. Videographers. TikTok explorers. Folks who think they're going to catch something supernatural on camera and go viral." "What happened? You see the reflection acting strange?" She hesitated. "Yes. The sheriff sighed, rubbed his eyes, and gestured toward a chair. "Sit." Hannah sat. "You're going to want to leave town," Adler said plainly. "Tonight, if possible. I just got here. And you should go. That lake isn't a tourist spot. It's a graveyard." "For who?" Adler did not answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward the bulletin board behind him where old missing person posters hung, some yellowed, some curling at the corners, all unsolved. Back in 1890, he began, there was a logging settlement near the lake. Briarwood Settlement. About 60 people lived there. One winter, a fire swept through the forest. The entire town vanished overnight. No bodies were found. No debris. No ashes. It was as if the people dissolved into the cold. "And you think their spirits are trapped in the lake?" "I don't think anything," Adler said firmly. "I know what I've seen. And I know people disappear when they spend too much time there, staring at their reflections." Hannah leaned forward. "What did you see?" The sheriff's jaw worked, muscles tightening. "My father," he said quietly. "But my father died in 1999. Hannah swallowed hard. Adler pointed at her camera bag. "Delete whatever you captured." "I can't do that." "You should. It's evidence," she said. "Whatever is happening at that lake, illusion, hallucination, phenomena, this could be huge. Or it could kill you," Adler snapped. His voice cracked louder than he intended, and both of them stood still for a moment, listening to the silence settle. Finally, he softened. "I'm telling you this because you seem like a decent person. Don't go back." Hannah's fingers curled around her strap. "I have to," she whispered. Adler's expression darkened. "Then God help you." Chapter 3, Return to Briarwood. Hannah returned to the lake the next night with heavier gloves, a thermos of coffee, and a determination stronger than her fear. She told herself she was doing this for documentation, for truth, for history. But beneath that, another reason whispered, she needed to know what had waved at her. The air was colder tonight. The fog thicker. She positioned herself at the same spot and raised her camera. The cabin was still there. But the door was closed again. And the figure was gone. She exhaled with relief. Then her reflection moved. Not her physical body, her reflection. In the water, Hannah watched herself lift an arm and wave. Slow. Deliberate. Exactly like the silhouette from the night before. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her tripod. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Her reflection tilted its head, smiled softly, then pointed toward the woods behind her. Hannah whirled around. The trees stood motionless. Nothing was there. When she turned back, her reflection was now standing closer than she was, impossibly close, its face rising just beneath the surface as if it were looking up at her through a glass barrier. Its lips parted. But no sound came out. Hannah dropped to her knees, staring. The reflection mouthed a single word. "Help!" Her heart hammered wildly. She leaned nearer. "What do you want? Who are you?" The reflection's expression twisted, eyes widening. Its face distorted. Wrinkled. Rotting. Drowned. Water bubbled from its mouth as it mouthed another word. "Run!" The lake exploded upward with a violent splash. Hannah stumbled back, screaming. Something had slammed against the underside of the water's surface, hard enough to ripple the shoreline. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing, breath shaking. That was no illusion. No trick of light. Something had physically struck the water. She grabbed her equipment and ran to her car. The whole drive back to her motel, she felt watched. Followed. When she reached her room, she locked the door, shut the blinds, and reviewed her photos. Each image was worse than the last. In several shots, her reflection wasn't alone. A man stood beside it, a tall, waterlogged figure with empty black sockets where his eyes should have been. In the final photo, he was behind her, standing over her shoulder. She slammed her laptop shut. Sleep didn't come. It didn't dare. Chapter 4, The Mirror's Lie. The next morning, Hannah splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection stared back, normal, tired, shaken, but normal. She leaned closer. The reflection did not move. She froze. Her pulse hammered in her throat as the reflection slowly curled its lips into a smile. Hannah stumbled backwards so hard she hit the wall. The reflection walked toward her, its hands pressed against the inside of the glass, its movements not matching her own. "Stop," she whispered. It didn't stop. The reflection raised one hand and slowly dragged its finger across its throat, as if slicing. Then it mouthed the same word as before. "Run." The lights flickered. The mirror cracked from end to end. Hannah ran out of the bathroom. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was Sheriff Adler. She answered with trembling hands. "You need to get out of your room," Adler said immediately. "Right now. Don't pack anything. Just go." "Why? You saw it, didn't you?" Hannah swallowed. "Yes. The lake has your reflection. Once it has that, it tries to replace you." "Replace me how?" "Your reflection becomes independent. It starts appearing in mirrors, windows, any reflective surface. And if you let it mimic enough of you, eventually..." He fell silent. "Sheriff? It takes your place. And you take its." A chill rattled down her spine. "You mean I'd be trapped underwater?" "Yes. How do I stop it?" "There's only one way," Adler said. "Never go back. Cut off the connection. Live your life far away from Briarwood." Hannah felt her throat tighten. "But I need answers." "No," Adler barked. "That's how it gets you. Every person who went back vanished. Your reflection is no longer safe. If you go near the lake again..." The line cut. Hannah stared at her phone. A new notification appeared on her screen. A photo. Sent from an unknown number. She opened it. Her reflection stood in the woods beside the lake, smiling, holding her camera. Behind it, the waterlogged man loomed with his hands on its shoulders. The message beneath the image read, "We are waiting." Chapter 5, The Lake Calls Back. Despite every warning, every instinct screaming at her to run, Hannah drove back toward the lake. She had no logical explanation. No justification. Only a pull, deep, magnetic, irresistible. When she reached the tree-line, the fog curled around her ankles like grasping fingers. She stepped forward. The forest was wrong, too silent, too still. No birds. No insects. Only the faint crackle of distant ice shifting beneath the lake's surface. When she broke through the last row of trees, her breath caught in her throat. The cabin from the reflection now stood on the shore. Physically solid. Real. Smoke drifted from its chimney. The door stood open. Inside, a faint orange glow flickered. Hannah raised her trembling camera. Click. And then she heard it, footsteps behind her. Crunching snow. Slow. Heavy. Wet. She turned. The man from her photos stood several yards away, dripping lake water, his clothes rotting, his skin pale as moonlight. His hollow sockets stared directly at her, though there were no eyes to see with. He lifted one hand and pointed toward the cabin. Hannah's voice barely broke through her frozen lungs. "What do you want?" His jaw opened, slowly, creakingly, and water poured out. Then a voice echoed behind her. "Hannah!" She spun. Her reflection stepped out of the cabin. Not from the lake. From the cabin itself. It smiled gently. "You need to come inside." Hannah backed away. "Stay away from me. We don't want to hurt you," the reflection whispered. "We want to show you the truth." The drowned man moved closer. Her reflection extended a hand. "Please. You're the only one who can free us." Chapter 6, The History of the Drowned. Hannah's breath puffed out in short clouds. "Free you from what?" Her reflection lowered its gaze. "From the lake. The lake is holding you. It holds all of us." Her reflection's eyes darkened. The settlers didn't burn. They drowned. Pulled under by something ancient, something older than the water itself. The drowned man stepped beside her reflection. His presence felt colder than the winter air. "He can't speak," the reflection explained. "None of us can. Not beneath the surface. So we speak through you." "Through me? You captured us," it said softly. "Through your lens. And now we have shape again, something closer to life. But we need more." "What more?" "A witness." Hannah frowned. "A witness to what?" "To the truth of how we died." Hannah shook her head. "I'm not part of this." "You are now." The reflection smiled sadly. "You brought us back. And only you can help us finish what was started." "What exactly was started?" "The lake chooses who to keep," her reflection whispered. "But it also chooses one to tell its story. That's you." She shook her head harder. "No. I didn't come here for this. I came for photos. And you took them. That made you ours." Chapter 7, The Trap. The drowned man stepped closer. Water dripped from his fingers, forming tiny dark spots in the snow. Hannah stepped backward toward the frozen lake, too close, her heels slipping on a patch of ice. She windmilled her arms to stay upright. "If I help you," she whispered, "will you let me go?" Her reflection tilted its head, considering. "No," it said gently. "But you'll understand." Before she could react, her reflection lunged. Their hands touched. And everything went black. Chapter 8, Under the Ice. Hannah woke submerged, lungs burning, eyes wide in the frigid dark. Water pressed around her from all sides. Ice stretched above her like a glass ceiling. She tried to scream, but only bubbles escaped. Shapes swam toward her, faces contorted in eternal terror. Skeletal fingers brushed against her cheeks. 100 mouths opened silently in the freezing abyss. The drowned man appeared before her, reaching out. She clawed at the ice above, desperate for air. Her palm cracked it. Cracked again. A sliver of moonlight pierced through. Then another hand grabbed hers from above. Her reflection's hand. It pulled her upward through the ice. She gasped violently as she broke through the surface, collapsing onto the frozen lake, coughing water. Her reflection knelt beside her, smiling softly. "Now you see," it whispered. "Now you belong." Chapter 9, The Exchange. Hannah staggered to her feet, drenched and shaking violently. The real world felt dimmer, thinner. The lake whispered behind her, hundreds of voices calling, begging, screaming, singing. Her reflection took her place. Literally. Where she once stood, now her reflection stood, solid, alive, breathing. It flexed its fingers, marveling at its skin. "Thank you," it whispered. Hannah stumbled backward in horror. "No, no, you can't." "I can," the reflection said. "You freed me. You gave me form. And now you take mine." Hannah looked down. Her hands were turning translucent. Her legs were fading. Her breath fogged less and less. "No," she rasped. "Please." The drowned man wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her gently toward the shattered ice. "It's time," the reflection said. "Sheriff Adler warned you." Chapter 10, Down Below. Hannah tried to scream as the drowned souls dragged her under, but her throat filled with icy water. She fought, kicked, struggled. But her body weakened. Her lungs burned. Her vision dimmed. The last thing she saw before the lake swallowed her completely was her reflection walking away from the shore, her face, her body, her life, while she sank into the darkness below. Epilogue, The New Reflection. 3 days later, Sheriff Adler filed a missing persons report. Hannah's motel room was empty. Her car abandoned near the lake. Her camera washed up on the shore. Inside the final photographs, Adler saw something that made his blood run cold. A woman who looked exactly like Hannah, smiling, warm, alive, walking along the shoreline. But in the water's reflection behind her, Hannah's real face stared back. Mouth open. Eyes wide. Drowning forever. The sheriff deleted the photos. But that night, when he looked into his bathroom mirror, someone else looked back. And they waved. Chapter 11, The Woman Who Wasn't Hannah. Sheriff Tom Adler had not slept in nearly 30 hours. The ache behind his eyes pulsed like a heartbeat, and the cold inside the station felt sharper than usual, as though winter had seeped through the walls and settled beneath his skin. He kept staring at the printed photograph of Hannah. Her face. Her posture. Her clothes. Everything looked identical to when he saw her last. Except her eyes. They were too calm. Too steady. Too certain she belonged here. Not a single trace of fear. Sheriff Adler knew, absolutely knew, that the woman walking around town in Hannah's skin was not human. And yet she smiled at everyone. Spoke politely. Bought coffee at the diner. Interviewed residents as if continuing her photography project. As if she owned that life. Adler dropped the photo. He had seen this once when he was a boy. A neighbor, Mrs. Kellerman, had fallen into the lake trying to retrieve a fallen scarf. Her reflection came back. Everyone pretended nothing was wrong, but the sheriff's father had known. One night, the reflection woman walked into the woods and never returned. The real Mrs. Kellerman was found under the ice months later, eyes open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Adler whispered to the empty office, "Not again. Not this time." He grabbed his coat. He had to confront Hannah. Chapter 12, Questions Without Answers. Hannah sat at the Briarwood diner counter sipping black coffee, her fingers tapping the ceramic mug in a steady, unnatural rhythm, too measured, too consistent. Adler entered. She looked up and smiled warmly. "Sheriff," she said. "Good morning. That's what we're calling it." She tilted her head. "You look tired. Long night?" Adler slid into the booth across from her. "Cut the act." Her smile did not fade, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "I'm not sure what you mean," she replied gently. "I know what you are." Silence. Other customers chatted quietly behind them, unaware of the tension threading between the sheriff and the woman who wasn't Hannah. "Where is she?" Adler asked. The reflection sipped her coffee. "She's where she belongs. Under the lake." "Yes." Adler leaned forward. "You don't have to keep her there." "Of course we do." "Why?" The reflection's fingers curled around her mug. "Because she saw us," it said softly. "And once you see us, the lake keeps you." Adler's jaw clenched. "Then why are you up here?" The reflection smiled again. "Because I earned it." Her voice was too smooth. Too perfect. Adler swallowed. "Are you going to hurt anyone?" "Not if they don't hurt me." "And what do you want?" The reflection leaned closer, her voice lowering until only the sheriff could hear it. "I want to live." Adler felt ice climb his spine. Not as a shadow. Not as a reflection. Not trapped under the ice, watching the world move without me. "I want breath. I want warmth. I want choice. You stole someone's life to get those. And I won't give it back." Her eyes hardened like frost. "I will not return below." Chapter 13, The Warning. When Adler stepped outside the diner, snow drifted softly from the gray sky. But it wasn't the snowfall that chilled him, it was the reflection of himself in the diner's glass window. It blinked a half second too late. He stumbled backward. No. No, no, no. His reflection lifted one hand and pressed it to the inside of the window. Then its mouth moved, forming silent words. "She is not the only one." Adler's breath fogged hard. The reflection pointed toward the woods. Toward the lake. Then the reflection smiled, a broken, grieving smile. And stepped backward. Fading into watery darkness that should not have existed in the window. Adler dropped to one knee on the icy sidewalk. It was happening again. Just like his father warned. The lake was restless. Hungry. Expanding. And now it wanted more than one life. It wanted the whole town. Chapter 14, The Cabin Returns. Night fell heavy and early, swallowing the last glow of day. Adler parked his cruiser near Briarwood Lake despite every instinct screaming not to get close. But he had to know. He had to see it. He had to understand why the reflection in the diner warned him. Fog rolled thick across the shoreline. The cabin, the one that was never real, stood again. Its windows glowed orange. Its door hung open. Its chimney exhaled smoke that smelled like burning pine and wet earth. Adler approached slowly, hand resting on the grip of his holstered revolver, though he knew bullets were useless. The snow crunched once beneath his boot. and the door creaked wider. Someone stood inside. The silhouette of a woman. Wet hair dripping. Shoulders shaking. "Hannah?" Adler whispered. The figure turned. Her eyes glowed faintly blue, like light refracting through deep water. Her skin was pale, too pale. Her lips were tinged purple. The real Hannah. She stepped forward, chains of shimmering frost clinging to her ankles like ghostly shackles. "Sheriff," she rasped. Water dripped from her voice. "You need to run." Adler froze. "Where are you?" "Please," she choked. "It's coming." "What's coming?" "The lake." The fog behind him shifted. Water slithered across the snow like living tendrils. And something enormous moved beneath the ice, something ancient, something restless, something hungry. Hannah screamed, "Run!" The lake cracked. And the night swallowed everything. Chapter 15, The Awakening. Adler ran harder than he had ever run in his life. Cracks spiderwebbed across the lake surface, spreading toward shore like veins of lightning. Behind him, water exploded upward, towering columns of liquid rising unnaturally high before crashing back down. Whispering voices bled through the wind, dozens layered atop hundreds, forming a deafening chorus of suffering. The lake was waking up. Adler reached the treeline just as a massive fissure split the shoreline. He dove behind a fallen pine. The water receded as fast as it had risen. Then silence. Then footsteps. Soft. Calm. Familiar. Hannah emerged from the fog, dry and perfect and smiling warmly. "Sheriff," she said. "Are you all right?" Adler aimed his shaking revolver at her. "Stay back." She stopped. Raised her hands. "You saw her, didn't you? The trapped one." "I saw the real Hannah." The reflection nodded. "She's deteriorating. Soon she will become like the others." "What others?" "The ones who drowned long ago." Adler steadied his breath. "Why did my reflection warn me?" "Because the lake wants you too." Adler's blood chilled. "But it can only take one Adler at a time. Your father resisted. So the lake waited." Her smile widened. "It's patient." Adler whispered, "What happens if it gets me?" She shrugged gently. "You replace one of us." Chapter 16, The First Choice. Adler lowered his gun. "What do you want from me?" Her answer was immediate. "Help me stay. You don't belong here." "Yes," she said softly. "I do. I earned this life. I endured the dark. I was forgotten. I was voiceless for more than a century." She stepped closer. "I just want to live." "And the real Hannah?" Her expression dimmed. "She cannot be saved." Adler's jaw clenched. "There has to be a way." "There isn't," she whispered. "Not unless someone trades places willingly." Adler froze. "That won't happen." "Are you so sure?" Her tone softened. "She begged you to run. But she didn't beg you to save her. She knows the truth. She knows her place is beneath the lake now." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I won't let the lake take me back." Her eyes glimmered like polished mirrors. "If the lake tries to reclaim me, I will fight. And people will die." Adler stared at her, reading the cold logic behind her eyes. "How many?" "Everyone between here and town." A long silence stretched between them. The sheriff understood the choice now. Save Hannah. Or save Briarwood. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the reflection woman was still staring, calm and certain. Choose, she whispered. Chapter 17, The Sheriff's Decision. Sheriff Adler stood motionless as snow fell around him in slow drifting spirals. His breath plumed out in ragged clouds. The reflection wearing Hannah's skin waited, utterly still, like a statue carved from winter itself. Choose, she repeated. Her voice soft but commanding, anchored by something old and cold beneath it. Adler swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to run, to leave the lake, leave the town, leave all of this behind. But he could not. He was the only one who knew the truth. If he walked away, Briarwood would become a graveyard without even a struggle. So he steadied his breath. Hannah is innocent, he said. She didn't deserve this. The reflection smiled sadly. Neither did we, Sheriff. None of us deserved to drown. None of us deserved to spend eternity watching the world through glass. You're not Hannah. But I could be, she whispered. I can live her life better than she ever could. I can use it, protect it, grow it. Isn't that what life is for? Adler stepped back, shaking his head. A stolen life is still stolen. The reflection exhaled. I hoped you would understand. But you're just like your father. My father died fighting this thing. Yes, she said. And he almost won. Adler froze. What do you mean, almost? But the reflection did not answer. Instead, she turned and looked toward the lake. Beneath the ice, something massive shifted. So large it distorted the water and pushed ripples outward under the frozen surface. Adler drew his gun again, though he knew it was useless. The reflection met his eyes. If you don't help me stay, she said softly, the lake will take someone else. Someone warm. Someone breathing. Who? She pointed toward town. Anyone. Chapter 18, The Town's Shadows. That night, strange things unfolded across Briarwood. Adler returned to town at a near run, breath sharp from cold and dread. The first sign something was wrong appeared outside the post office. Mrs. Calloway, the elderly male clerk, stood staring into the window glass. Completely still. Her reflection did not match her posture. It looked younger. Taller. Watching her with predatory interest. Ma'am, Adler called softly. She didn't blink. He stepped closer. Her reflection smirked, an expression Mrs. Calloway could never make. Adler grabbed her shoulders and yanked her away from the window. She gasped violently, stumbling back as though surfacing from deep water. Sheriff? What on earth? Don't look into reflective surfaces tonight. She frowned. That's absurd. Why? Just trust me. The second incident came minutes later at the diner. A teenage busboy was cleaning a chrome napkin dispenser when his reflection inside it grabbed his wrist. He screamed, shoving it away. The dispenser clattered across the floor, metal ringing. Adler arrived just in time to see the reflection's hand pressed against the inside of the stainless steel, palm flattened like it wanted out. No one slept that night. The town buzzed with unease, though nobody understood why. Only Adler saw the truth. The lake was testing its reach. If left unchecked, it would consume the entire town, one reflection at a time. Chapter 19, The Return to the Cabin. The next morning, Adler returned to the lake alone. The false Hannah stood by the water, watching the ice with a quiet intensity, as if listening to whispers beneath it. She didn't turn as he approached. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "What happens when the lake grows impatient?" "I saw enough," Adler muttered. "Now you understand why I can't go back. Why I won't. And you think I should just allow an innocent woman to drown in your place?" The reflection turned, her expression unreadable. "It isn't drowning," she said. "It's becoming part of us. Don't spin this." Adler stepped closer. "You condemned her. You could save her." He stiffened. "You said there's no way." "There isn't," she said simply, "unless someone chooses to trade places." A long silence. Adler's breath caught. "Someone?" he asked. "Or me specifically?" "You," the reflection said. "The lake wants you. It always has." Adler's stomach twisted. "Because of my father?" "Yes." He shook his head. "I won't sacrifice myself." She smiled faintly. "I didn't think you would." "Then why tell me?" "Because you needed to know she can't be saved. So you would stop trying. So you would let her fade peacefully instead of fighting for something impossible." Her voice softened, almost tender. "You're a good man, Sheriff. But goodness won't change the lake." "What will?" "What always has, fear." Then she walked past him, calm and unhurried, as though she had all the time in the world. Adler watched her go. Then he made a choice. He would not sacrifice himself. He would not let Hannah drown. He would not let the reflection wear her life. There had to be another way. And he would find it. Even if he had to face the lake himself. Chapter 20, The Ice Beneath. That night, Adler returned to the lake with a sledgehammer and a coiled rope slung around his shoulder. He stood on the frozen surface, the moon high and pale above. Beneath his boots, faint silhouettes swam slowly, shapes drifting beneath the ice like forgotten memories. "Hannah," he whispered. "Show me where you are." A shadow paused beneath the ice. Then another. Then a hand pressed up against the frozen surface directly beneath him. Adler's breath caught. He knelt and pressed his palm to the ice. "Hannah?" The face that rose into view was hers. Her lips blue. Her eyes wide. Her hair floating around her face like dark seaweed. She mouthed something. Adler lowered his head. She mouthed again, still silent. "S. T. A. Y." Adler whispered, "I'm not leaving you." Her eyes widened. She shook her head violently, pointing behind him with frantic, jerking motions. Adler turned. The false Hannah stood on the shore, watching him. "You're interfering," she said softly. Adler gripped the sledgehammer. "If I break the ice above her, can she come up?" "No," the reflection replied. "She is bound to the lake's underside. She will never surface. Then I'll pull her out. She won't survive the cold. Or the air. Or the separation." Adler refused to believe it. "There has to be a way." "There is." She stepped onto the ice. "You take her place." Adler lifted the sledgehammer. "I'm not negotiating. And I'm done pretending to be human." Her reflection flickered, eyes darkening, skin shimmering with wet luminescence. She stepped closer. And the lake cracked beneath the sheriff's feet. Chapter 21, The Fall. The ice shattered. Adler plunged into the freezing black water. The cold hit like knives. His lungs seized. His heart clenched. Darkness swallowed him instantly. Hands reached for him, cold, skeletal hands pulling from every direction. Drowned voices echoed in muffled whispers around him. He fought upward, kicking wildly, desperate for air. Hannah drifted near, her mouth opening in a silent scream as she reached toward him. He grasped her wrist, icy, fragile. Then something enormous moved beneath them, stirring the water into a violent current. Adler tried to haul Hannah upward. She shook her head, pushing his hand away. No! 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 She pointed behind him. Adler turned in the blackness. Two glowing eyes stared back at him, deep, ancient, inhuman. The lake's entity. The thing that drowned the settlement. The thing that created the reflections. It surged upward. Adler kicked, lungs burning, heart hammering. The entity's massive shape rushed toward him. And something yanked him upward with impossible strength. The water exploded as Adler burst through the surface, gasping for air. He collapsed onto the shattered ice. When he turned, Hannah was gone. Completely gone. Chapter 22, The New Void. The reflection stood a few feet away, watching him silently. "You can't save her," she whispered. "Stop trying." Adler lay trembling on the ice, breath shallow. "What happens now?" he rasped. "That depends," she said. "On what?" "Whether you surrender," she said simply, "or whether the lake takes her anyway." Adler's heart froze. "Her?" he whispered. The reflection nodded slowly. "Hannah is gone," she said. "So the lake will take another in her place." Adler's stomach dropped. "Who?" The reflection smiled. "Anyone it chooses." She stepped forward. "Unless," she whispered, "you give it yourself." Chapter 23, Sacrifice. Sheriff Tom Adler felt the cold in his bones long after he'd crawled from the shattered ice. His chest ached with a weight that was more than frost. He had failed to pull Hannah free. She had vanished beneath the lake in a blackness that felt like argument and memory at once. For a long minute he lay on his back and watched his breath fog the moonscape, counting the seconds like a man who had finally learned precisely how much time his body would allow him to think. The reflection stood at the tree lean, close enough that he could see how the moonlight turned its skin to pale enamel. It watched him without pity. "You could stop this tonight," it said. "You could let the lake have me, and it would let them." "Stop," Adler said. His voice was dry. "Don't finish that lie." The reflection's mouth softened to an expression that might once have been pity. "I'm offering you a choice. Once. Final." Adler tasted blood on his lip from a cut he'd not noticed. He pushed himself upright. Trees murmured in the black. Somewhere in town, a dog howled the long, low moan of animals that understand weather before people do. "You showed me how it chooses," Adler said. "You told me how it takes. You told me how it waits. But you lied about one thing, you pretended there was no other way." "Then tell me the way," the reflection said. "Or surrender and I will keep living, Sheriff. I will sit in kitchens. I will tuck children into beds. I will be the face of this town. And none of you will know." Adler thought of Hannah's eyes beneath the ice, the way they had held a terrible calm, as if she had seen something so old that recognition had replaced panic. He thought of the missing log in town, never found, of his father and the long, bitter nights spent listening for splashes that never came, of the people in Briarwood who went about their days unaware each mirror and chrome surface had a second party interested in swapping places. What if I refuse? He asked. What if I stay and fight? The reflection smiled. Then the lake will take someone else. It does not bargain twice. It is not a butcher with a tally, it is a hunger. Adler stood. He pulled his coat tight, the rope and the ruined sledge leaning against a tree, useless things that had once felt like plans. He thought of plans his father had made, barrels of oil and a stretch of burned earth, a desperate hunch that if the lake could not reflect flame, it could not house the dead. The attempt had failed then. It had failed because the lake understood that to be a mirror of loss was not the same as being loss itself. You know, Adler said, that it takes more than a body. It takes willingness. It takes the acceptance of a world upside down. Those who fight are harder to keep. The reflection cocked its head. You think I couldn't accept? No, Adler said. I know you can't. Your kind resents it, because you remember being alive, and you hate the memory. But the lake cannot feed on anger alone. It needs a person who will let go. The reflection's smile thinned into an expression of stone. Then you'll be the one who lets go. You'll walk in willingly. Adler made himself laugh once, a small, broken sound. It did not lift his spirit. I'm supposed to hand myself to an ancient thing because you're afraid? Because you loved people enough to stand between them and the dark, the reflection answered. Because you carry your father like an armor. Because the lake wants balance and it wants a continuity it understands, someone who will not fight it until it has the town. Something in Adler loosened, grief or clarity, a hinge finally unbinding. He closed his eyes and remembered his father's hands on his shoulders, the way old men make young men into dogs for duty. He remembered the bulletin board at the station, the crooked missing person notices. He imagined Briarwood waking to find that every polished surface hid eyes they could not trust, that children would learn to fear mirrors, that reflection would become a second language of danger. No, he said finally. I'll do it, on one condition. The reflection's expression did not change. Name it. Free Hannah, Adler said. If I go under for a bargain, then the people you've kept, your settlement, those months, whoever else is trapped, let them go too. Not replaced. Released. No more exchanges once I'm beneath. A faint noise left the reflection, almost like the onset of a laugh, but humorless. You imagine I possess that power? You said the lake listens to bargains, Adler pushed. You said it remembers offerings. Make the bargain then. Take me, but give them their lives back. The reflection's gaze tightened. There was a tiny involuntary tremor behind its eyes, something that looked like surprise. You're asking it to be merciful, it said. I'm asking for it to be just, Adler corrected. For a long moment the world held its breath. The treetops shivered faintly, as if some old heart beat below the water and waited to see which way the world leaned. At last the reflection nodded. Come to the cabin at midnight, it said. Come willingly, and I will take you beside the water. The lake listens when an offering is made freely. Adler hesitated only once. Then he turned back toward the road, toward the town he swore to protect, toward Hannah's empty motel room where someone might still wake and remember nothing at all. He gathered what little he could, blankets, a photograph of his father folded into his wallet, a small tin whistle his daughter once gave him. He did not tell anyone. He left a note on his desk at the station: "If I am late, the lake has won. Burn everything reflective until morning." He packed shaking hands around the pen. It was a small war for a sleepy town, but then, what war isn't small to those who must live through it? Chapter 24, Midnight at the Cabin. Snow had fallen anew by the time Adler reached the cabin. The moon sliced the world into halves of silver and black. He walked slow, like a man who wanted to watch his own footsteps and memorize them in case they were the last he would ever make. The reflection stood in the door, waiting like a host who knew precisely what favor to ask. "You ready?" it asked. Adler handed the rope to the reflection. It was a token, not a tool. "Do what the lake requires." The reflection took it with long, polite fingers. "Hold out your hand." He did. A whisper rose from the water, soft as breath, old as rot, and full of names that were not quite names, the syllables of things lost. The reflection turned and walked to the shoreline. The moon made its skin into a second pale water. Waves licked at its ankles though no wind moved. "Please," Adler said, though the words felt thin. "You promised release," he added, pressing his free hand to his chest as if that could brace the world. The reflection looked back, and for a fragile sliver of a second, the eyes behind its mask were something like remorse. Then they were emptiness again. It stepped into the water. The surface welcomed it without resistance. It stood there, a woman of two worlds, and then it began to speak in the older tongue the lake remembered. Words that were not words in English but sounds that pried at memory. The cold clutched Adler's throat. From below, something moved. The water swelled. The moonlight on its face became a ring of dented silver. "Now," said the reflection. Adler stepped forward. The water rose to meet him like a hand. He felt the first kiss of it on his boots, and then the cold crawled up his calves, his knees. When the water reached his chest, he paused and looked back at the town's dark silhouette, at the diner where someone now worried, at the one house where a child slept with a polished toy, at Hannah's motel room, empty and blue. He thought of all the faces on the bulletin board. He thought of his father's hands. He thought of finite things a man is given, a name, a duty, a place to stand. He took a breath and stepped forward into the water with the will of a man who had finally decided which thing mattered more than himself. He walked until the water closed over his mouth. Beneath the surface the world rearranged itself. Cold pressed his lungs, then paused, as if the lake itself measured the offering. He felt, impossibly, a tug, not a hand but the sense of a ledger being opened and turned. In the silence of that enormous chest, the lake considered. A voice, no, a chorus, rose around him. The drowned faces hovered, and then, with a peculiar, agonized gentleness, they began to pull at the edges of their bindings. Chains the lake had wrapped like ivy began to fray. Above him, muffled and thin, he heard the reflection speak. "By choice, not by theft," it said. He felt the words as a warmth in the dark, an energy that was neither kind nor cruel but utterly neutral. It was the lake honoring a bargain. Something shifted, and the water that held Hannah loosened like a hand unclenching. Hands, warm and human and clumsy, reached for him. Not spectral fingers this time, the hands of people who had been given back their breath. He felt a grip on his forearm and then another. The pressure of lungs, the weight of a body, and then the violent, wrenching motion of ascent. He broke the surface with a gasp that ravaged his chest. Moonlight hit his face, and for one wild heartbeat the world was all lungs and stars and the frantic, beautiful noise of people inhaling. On the shoreline, dozens of bodies boiled out from under the ice like seeds pushed from a dark earth. The logging settlers, faces aged and young, sprang up coughing and bewildered. Hannah stumbled free, shaking snow and water like a dog released from a long keeping. She coughed and looked at Adler, her eyes wet and cognizant, as if she had returned from a long sleep with memory intact and terrible. She looked at him and mouthed a word, "Thank you." But the lake kept its balance. For every freed face, for every breath returned, there was a reordering. As waters calmed, Adler felt a new pressure in his chest, not the cold of death, but a slow, spreading numbness like oil settling through bone. He glanced down and his reflection was no longer obedient. It moved independently, one hand pressed to the glass of the mirror world beneath his skin. The reflection he had bargained with stepped back from the shore, its skin gleaming with water, and then it smiled with the weary ease of someone who had been granted a want. It laid a hand, cool as a coin, on Hannah's shoulder, and Hannah shivered as if touched by an absent breeze. "We kept our end," the reflection said softly. Adler tried to stand. His knees trembled. He felt the world slide a degree off axis, an inch of light gone. He had freed the trapped, the lake had paid its price. But when he reached up to touch his own face, his fingers met cold enamel. The image in the water looked back with his father's eyes, and the reflection's smile mixed together in a pattern his mind tried and failed to map. He had traded. Epilogue, Mirrors. Briarwood woke the next morning to a town that looked the same and felt a fraction different. People who had been missing for a century sat at diner counters, blinking like men who had slept wrong. News vans came, and reporters penned stories, trying to find words for a resurrection that had no comforting theology. Some called it a miracle. Others, a trick of nature finally misinterpreted. Hannah returned to her camera with hands that trembled but a clarity in her gaze that weathered the town's curiosity like a new, fragile armor. She documented the people who had been given back the chance to learn a lost language of names. She photographed faces no one had remembered but everyone instinctively knew, and she slowly built an archive that might teach the world what to do if such a lake ever stirred again. Sheriff Tom Adler did not return to his station in full. He walked the town smiling when smiles were needed, speaking softly when quiet would do. He visited the families of the freed settlers and the households whose reflections had been tested by the lake. He stood sometimes at his daughter's old playground and watched as children learned to measure their shadows without staring too long. But every polished surface carried a small calculus of risk. Mirrors in Briarwood were treated with new suspicion. Chrome fixtures were dulled, and shopkeepers covered glass at night. It became common, for a season, to sleep with the brim of a hat over one eye, the old superstitions threaded into a new logic. Sometimes, when he passed the soda shop mirror or glanced into a dark window, Tom saw a quiet smile that was not quite his, and he felt a cold press into the place of a choice he had made. The bargain had been cruel and fair in equal measure. It had been exactly the kind of justice that kills and preserves in the same stroke. Once, late in summer, Hannah walked up to him on the old cracked sidewalk. "You're doing the right thing," she said, meeting his eyes with a steadiness that made him want to weep. "You gave them voices." He nodded. "I gave something." She searched his face as if mapping it for a story. Are you okay?" He let his mouth make a small smile. "I get by." "Hannah," he said then, "you remember anything? Before, under?" She looked away briefly, and her lips shaped 1,000 unspoken images. Pieces. Faces. A smell like iron and cinnamon. A song. I remember wanting someone to pull me up. Tom's gaze drifted to a cracked shop window across the street. When he looked that way, the glass showed him his face and, just for the briefest instant, someone else's hand on his shoulder, a hand that had the exact lines his father used to have. He closed his eyes and breathed in the blue of the afternoon. "Tell the new ones," he said. "Teach them to cover mirrors on certain nights. Teach them to leave a light by the water. Teach them to be careful of what they wish to understand." Hannah nodded gravely. "I will. I owe you that." He watched her go and then turned slowly toward the lake. The water lay still and honest in the sun now, a sheet of black glass with gulls picking at the edges. He walked closer and stood without dipping his toes in. The surface reflected a town, a sky, a face, his face, lined but steady. For a moment, the reflection hesitated, then raised a hand in a small, private wave. Adler returned it, because he could not. Then he smiled, an admission, an apology, a resolution, and walked away. In Briarwood, the word reflection became a careful word, a verb and a warning, both used in one breath. People learned to cover things they did not understand and to honor what had been returned. They learned that bargains have shapes and that choices leave marks on the skin that outlive the pulse. Sometimes, late at night, when the moon was a knife and the lake whispered beneath a thin crust of frost, Sheriff Adler would stand at his window and press the heel of his palm against the cool glass. He would feel, through it, for the echo of his father, of the man who taught him to stand between the town and danger, and he would look for the place in that reflection that was no longer his. He never stopped listening. And sometimes, when the town slept and the world seemed small and fragile, he thought he heard, beneath the wind, the faint, human sound of laughter, people who had been given back, laughing as if waking from a long, terrible dream. That was enough, he decided. For now, it was enough. Have a nice day. Thank you for watching.